Good evening. In accordance with Board of Education policy, as senior member of the board, I would like to call this organizational meeting of the Board of Education to order for the purpose of electing officers. Pursuant to board policy, I will ask for nominations for each of the positions, chairperson, vice chairperson, and secretary. Once all of the nominations have been made and seconded, we will vote position by position. May I have nominations for chairperson? Robin,
I'd like to nominate Jill McCammon for chair.
do I have a second? John? Okay. May I have nominations for vice chair? Oh, excuse me, any other nominations? No. Okay. May I have nominations for vice chairperson? I would like to nominate John Cini. Do I have a second? Sarah? Okay. May I have are there any other nominations? Okay. May I have nominations for secretary? John?
Sarah Parent, please.
Okay. May I have a second? Robin? All right. Are there any other nominations? Okay. Now that all nominations and seconds are in order, we will vote on each position. All those in favor of electing Jill McCammon for the position of chair, please indicate by raising your hand. Okay, that is Cini, myself, Parent, Nelson, and Grambling. Okay. All those opposed? That is Brown. Okay. All of those abstaining? That is Best and Lublin. Thank you very much. Jill McCammon is elected as the chair for the Board of Education. Okay. Thank you. All those in favor of electing John Cini for the position of vice chair, please indicate that by raising your hand. Okay, that is Cini, Brown, myself, McCammon, Parent, and Nelson, and Grambling. All right, all of those opposed? Okay. All of those abstaining? That is Best and Lublin. John Cini is elected as vice chair for the Board of Education. Congratulations. Okay, all of those in favor of electing Sarah Parent for the position of secretary, please indicate that by raising your hand. Okay, that is Cini, Best, Brown, McCammon, Parent, and Nelson. And Grambling. Thank you, guys. All of those opposed? Abstaining? That is Lublin. Sarah Parent is elected as the secretary for the Board of Education. Congratulations, Sarah. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? John, seconded by Julie. I will turn over responsibility for running the rest of the meeting to myself. Thank you all. Okay. Second to switch around. Thank you. Okay, I would like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting is on Tuesday, November 28th at 7:30 p.m. in the Board of Education meeting room. Okay, with that, I'll move on to the chairperson's report. I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to serve as chairperson of this board. For those who don't know me, I've served on this board for 7 years. I'm here because I'm passionate about students of all ages, stages, and abilities and how they learn. I love to talk about learning, and I love to talk about how kids do it. I have 4 boys, all of whom attended ELP, and who between them have spent time at three of Darien's 5 elementary schools. Today, 2 are in high school, 1 is in middle school, and 1 is in 3rd grade at Hindley. I currently serve as the chair of the Hinley Homes and Royal Building Committee, and before that was the chair of the Darien High School Building Committee. I care very deeply about the schools in our town, but I'm only one of 9 sitting up here. My fellow board members and I have young children, children out of college, children who are heading off to exciting colleges, and children who may not be college bound at all. We have children who sing in the choir or on stage, who play in the band and on the football field. We have children who excel academically, some who sit in the middle of the pack, and some who need significant academic support. And each of us sits here in support of all of those children. The 9 of us share our care and our passion for the education of our community's children. The coming months will not be without challenges as we face teacher shortages nationwide, but particularly in our district, as we monitor the academic and emotional impacts of COVID that continue to affect our district today and our children today. And as we work through how we continue to teach everybody to the best of our ability as the Board of Ed, as administrators, as teachers, as staff, and as students who are trying to learn, we will have to all work together to figure out how to move forward. We don't have to agree, but we have to work together. And so this board sits here asking for partnership from our community, from our staff, from our teachers, and from our students to continue to move each and every one of our children forward. With that, I will move on to the approval of the minutes. Oh, did I skip already?
Yeah, public comment.
Oh, excuse me, public comment. Thank you. It's going to take me a second. Thank you.
Good evening. If anyone in person would like to participate, please come up to the podium. State your name and address. You have up to 3 minutes to comment. If anyone online would like to participate, please use the raised hand icon. There are no raised hands at this time.
Okay. All right. And with that, we'll move on then to the superintendent's report. Please, Alan.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for those who are in the audience. Special word of welcome again to Mr. Grambling, to the board. Welcome, sir. Last Tuesday, when everybody was election day, was a special day in the district for professional development. One of the highlights of the day was Dr. Banhar, who's the world-renowned mathematics professor, who really specializes in Singapore math, which connects directly to our math curriculum. Classroom teachers, special education teachers, all participated, particularly grades 1 and 4 and up at the high school. It was interesting because thank you to the parents of our young students who actually came in for the day. So it was a fishbowl activity where the professor conducted a class in front of, with the students, with the teachers all around. So it was a special learning experience for both our young students and for our staff, and we look forward to them coming back later in the year. I will say one of the most special days of the year is Veterans Day in this district. Being in school, I think, is a good thing because it gives us a way to honor our veterans, and a word of congratulations and appreciation to our parents around the district, our staff, and our students for making this day so special for our veterans as we honor them and we thank them for their patriotism, their sacrifice, their love of country, and their service. This is touching experiences up and down the system. So thank you to everyone. Thank you also to the staff and the parents that attended last week's Ox Ridge Town Hall. It was very helpful and your feedback was appreciated, as was your actual attendance and participation. I will communicate with the parents immediately after tonight's meeting. We are still expecting word on the waiver. We don't anticipate that coming into early December. So I think you announcing the bonfire? Yeah. You got it. Okay, you got that covered. Good. Okay. We are scheduling some staff and parent focus groups for the communications committee for Tuesday, November 28th and November 30th, just after the break. So we'll be soliciting some participation from parents. Thank you to approximately 50 staff members today who participated in instructional rounds training, which is really classroom practice and classroom observation training. That was conducted by the Associate Executive Director of CAS. Thank you also to Jill and Katie for representing the board at next week's Cap Cave this week's actually, end of the week will be Caps Cave Convention in Mystic. Got 3:08? You got that covered. Okay, so just sign up for the weekend. Parent conference aren't that far around the corner. The 28th through December 1st are elementary parent conferences. We have a few upcoming meetings. November 16th is the Board of Education Finance Committee. The 28th is the next Board of Education meeting. We will have to schedule a facilities committee prior to that meeting. And just remember, December 9th, that's a wee bit of a change, is a wee bit earlier in the process. We are doing the tour of the schools for the boards and so on. So it's just a wee reminder about that. We wish good luck to the Blue Wave team. It's that time of the year. It's Turkey Bowl time. I haven't won a Turkey Bowl yet. I haven't witnessed, so I'm looking forward to our kids doing well. Happy Thanksgiving at this particular point to our families and staff. It's amazing that we're actually saying that. We're at this time of the year. I'm not quite sure where the time goes, but we wish our staff and our parents a very happy Thanksgiving. And the Southern Fairfield County Legislative Breakfast is December 8th, but we'll communicate that to the board chair. Thank you. Yes, I do have one other announcement, actually. As some families know, or many families know, we've been struggling with coverage for some Spanish teachers. It's difficult to get elementary Spanish teachers. That is one of the shortage areas. I'm pleased to announce that starting on Monday, we will have certified teacher coverage, Spanish teacher coverage in both Ox Ridge and Tokenique. Both of those teachers will serve until the new year, when the other certified teachers can actually commence their work. They have to submit their notice and they have to essentially wait a month. I will share that one of the teachers who's starting is our department chair for world languages, and she will serve over until January when the permanent position is taken over. So I'm glad that we have 2 permanent certified Spanish teachers in place starting on Monday.
All right. Before I give it to Swaha, I neglected to welcome Greg Grambling, our newest board member, to thank Sarah Parent for continuing to serve and to thank Dennis Maroney for continuing to serve. He's on vacation, well-deserved one, I'm sure, but my apologies. And welcome, Greg. And thank you, Sarah and Dennis. Swaha, student representative reports.
Good evening. So we ended October with our annual student government hosted trunk or treat event. And it was really successful in raising funds, and we're able to make a gift to person. And then Theater 308's The Dining Room will have its opening night on Thursday and will be running this weekend. So please buy tickets to support the students. The DHS band will be collecting turkeys next Tuesday for a food drive on November 21st. And next Tuesday night is also the Darien High School bonfire, which student government has put a lot of time and effort into planning. So I'm really excited for it. And it's open to all grades, and it runs from 6 to 8 p.m. There'll be food trucks and music, so please come. And then Turkey Bowl tickets are on sale, and tickets for families are on Thursday morning at Weed Beach. And also the fall sports season is coming to an end, and all the teams did a great job.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'll move on to the approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held on October 24th, 2023? Julie, seconded by Robin. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Okay. Board committee reports. Julie.
Thank you. The Communications Committee met on November 3rd. As Dr. Adley just mentioned, we are preparing for focus groups later this month, the 28th and the 30th, with parents, staff, and community. And we are hoping that when we meet at our next meeting on December 15th, we'll be able to talk about some of the learnings from the focus groups.
Anyone else? Sarah.
The curriculum committee last met to talk about the course proposals that you'll see and we will discuss later this evening. And we also discussed the literacy waiver, which we also have an update on. So more to come.
The HHR did receive its set of bids. They're being scrubbed at this time. We'll be reviewing them in detail on Wednesday evening. So we'll know more about that project after Wednesday. Okay. Any other board committees? All right. that presentations and discussions. A possible appointment of the Oxbridge Elementary School interim principal, Alan.
Good evening again, and I'm very pleased to introduce to the board who did interview Dr. Harry Lab. Dr. Lab is here with us this evening, and the board did interview Harry, and so he comes before us to transition into the interim principal up at Oxbridge School, and he will be the principal throughout the remainder of the year with all the responsibilities and decision making that goes along with that particular position. Harry has been in a variety of positions and some very similar to the ones that he is transitioning into, so he's familiar with this type of challenge, and also brings a wealth of experience in early literacy, numeracy, special education, and early childhood education. So we're fortunate to have Dr. Lab with us, and he's here before us for consideration for appointment by the board.
Wonderful. Okay. May I have a motion to appoint Dr. Harry Lobb as interim principal for Oxbridge Elementary School for the 2023-2024 school year? John, seconded by Julie. All those in favor? Greg, are you voting? Okay. So that's Best, Brown, Lublin, Sini, McCammon, Parent, Nelson, all those abstaining. Grambling. Okay. That's it for the votes. All right, Dr. Lobb, would you like to speak, please?
Congratulations to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
I have to say, I am so thrilled to be coming to Oxbridge. It is, the homework I did on the school told me all sorts of great things about it, but standing out there for a few minutes just a little while ago just reinforced everything that I had felt. Just people who have such nice things to say about the school. And I just hope I can live up to your expectations to make sure that the kids have a smooth and wonderful year. I know there's been some disruption, and I think right now the focus needs to be on just making sure that everything goes along smoothly and well, and get the kids through and have a wonderful, wonderful experience for them. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for serving.
Have you been to one or two board members in your career? This is the time to step out. I think you'll recognize the opportunity.
Okay. Presentation and discussion on the October 1st district enrollment report and projections. Mr. Richard Rudel and Mr. Patrick Gallagher.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Pat Gallagher, the planning manager with the SLAM Collaborative. I'll go through this relatively quickly and leave some time for Q&A. Happy to answer any questions from the more detailed report. So I'll start by just going over our projections model from last year, how we're doing, and then we'll get into the enrollment drivers, followed by our updated numbers for this year. So every year we start our process looking at the performance of last year's enrollment projections. This year, the median model, which we typically recommend, is trending, or actual enrollments are trending below the median model. So overall, your K-12 enrollment is about 78 students below the median model. And that percentage below is roughly equal between the different grade groupings, with K-5 at about 1.5% below the projections, middle school at about 1.4% below, and high school at about 2% below. And every year this helps us fine tune our model to reflect current conditions. We will note that the kindergarten projection did perform well this year, so that's usually a tricky number to get given the lack of information on rising 4-year-olds. We were within 2 students there. Looking at the individual elementary schools, most of the schools performed well within about 5 students, with the exception of Royal, which came in about 22 students lower than projections. And part of that is attributed to lower than anticipated student generation at Darien Commons. Now that that project is completed and being leased up, we anticipated more students in that development this year than are currently in the seats. And then Hindley, Tokenique, and Ox Ridge are all performing slightly below the projections, and Holmes trending slightly above. Not much new in terms of the community trends in terms of population. Decennial census data was released a few years ago, and in the interim years, we just rely on annual population estimates from DPH or the Department of Public Health. They're estimating a modest increase of about 2% of your total population growth since 2020. So that captures some of the families that moved into the community during COVID and the 2 years after. Births are one of the most important data points that we use, and this is what we use to forecast your kindergarten enrollments. And historically, this is the best indicator. If we were to take our births 5 years prior, that's a good indicator of the number of kindergartners that will enroll 5 years later. And what we've seen in Darien and most of your peer community, a peak in the late 90s and early 2000s, declining births, which corresponded to declining kindergarten enrollment throughout the 2000s. And then that really stabilized starting in about 2010. And what we've seen over the last 3 years, and especially in 2021 and 2022, we saw some elevated births in Darien, so reaching almost 250 in 2021 and 2022. Again, that aligns with that influx of new families into the community that we saw in those years. For 2023, we are trending slightly below 2021 and 2022 levels, but still above the pre-pandemic average. And so those birth trends are incorporated into our birth projections, which we prepare for 4 years in order to project the last 4 kindergarten classes. The housing market's another key community trend that we follow every year, notably home sales. Housing turnover is always a driver of in-migration into Darien. And what we saw back when my colleague Mike Zuba presented the last 2 years is a really sharp increase in the number of home sales in 2020 and 2021, which in turn led to greater in-migration of students into Darien public schools. What we saw is that for 2022, sales started to decrease to pre-pandemic levels, and this year sales are trending below pre-pandemic levels. And so that, we believe, is one of the drivers of why the enrollment is lower than we initially anticipated. We also track home sale prices. Back when home sales declined during the Great Recession, there was a corresponding decrease in price. So it was clear that demand was also going down. However, prices continue to rise in Darien. And now they are at 1.78 million year to date for single family homes. So there's clearly still demand, but low inventory is preventing some of that demand from being met currently. Every year, we also coordinate with your planning department and also pull permit data from the state. Historically, the number of single family permits in Darien is canceled out by your demolition permits. So there's very little net gain in new single family housing. And the spikes you'll see in the chart really are when the multifamily projects are approved. And so the latest upticks in 2021 and 2022 are when 2 of your more recent projects were permitted, and those have started to issue certificates of occupancy over the last year. So looking at a map of new development, we apply the students from this future housing to each of the individual elementary schools so that we are accounting for them. So we have the Norotan Heights Shopping Center project in the Royal School District. Darien Commons is now complete, although it is still in the lease-up period. That is also in the Royal District. We have in Tokenique, we have Corbin District and the Parklands project, which are both accounted for in the projections. And then we have a range of smaller developments with a handful of units that are accounted for in our baseline model. This table just shows the information that the planning department provided to us, which is really a status update of recent developments as of October of this year. And so we have several projects under construction that are of scale, notably the Norotan Heights Shopping Center and the Corbin District, which is a multi-phased project. So phase 1 is now complete. Phase 2 and future phases are still under construction. And then the Parklands project approved and not yet built is the other major project of scale. So additional multifamily housing is, typically not the highest generator of students when we look at students per unit, in particular transit-oriented development, which tends to attract fewer families. But nevertheless, because of the scale of some of these developments, we did develop housing multipliers so that we're accounting for those students in our projections. With Darien Commons and the Corbin District, they are occupied, but they're still in the lease-up period. So we've accounted for, we've deducted whatever students are coming out of those developments today, but are anticipating that it may take a few years for those developments to reach their peak enrollment. So we're still carrying forward some additional student generation in subsequent years. And this just shows our student generation estimates that are incorporated into the projections for those 4 projects of scale. So we're anticipating a total student generation of about 110 students once all these projects are built and occupied, 42 in elementary schools, 31 in the middle school, and 36 in the high school. Looking at our historic enrollment trends, Darien has always been unique in that it saw its peak enrollment 10 years after the state average, and most communities, most suburban communities in Connecticut peaked really in the mid 2000s. So what we see kind of as larger state and regional trends may not always necessarily be the most applicable when looking at Darien, which again underscores the importance of looking at some of these local trends. Elementary school enrollment is always the leading end of any trend that we see in terms of enrollment. So it's the first grade grouping that may see a decrease, and it's also the first grade grouping that may flatten and ultimately rebound. And what we saw is that starting in about 2013, your elementary enrollment started a period of modest decline, reaching a low of about 2,060 students for the 2021 school year. After an uptick in 21-22, enrollment has been very stable at just over 2,100 students. And this just shows a breakdown by school. One of the interesting trends is we look at net migration. So that looks at the number of students who move in relative to the number of students that move out in grades 1 through 5 compared to K through 4 the year prior. And if you look at the chart historically, there was a lot of red. And so Darien saw net out migration. So there were more students moving out once they entered elementary school than moved in. But starting in about 2019, we have seen a consistent period of growth where each grade group grows as it moves on average from K to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. So that's a testament to your attractiveness as a school system, where you're likely retaining more students who may have historically enrolled in private school. Looking at our elementary enrollment trends, that 5-year overall enrollment trend was very stable. However, different schools grew at different rates. We see Hindley, Holmes, and Royal all saw decreasing enrollment over that over the last 3 years, whereas Tokenique and Ox Ridge have seen modest growth of about 5% and 6% respectively. And I will note that we did see some pretty sizable growth at Ox Ridge after that building project was complete. And that's something we're keeping in mind as you're completing your next round of renovation projects at Hindley, Holmes, and Royal of I'll call induced demand of, that drives your attractiveness as a community, and we may see some higher student migration as a result. Looking at our middle school enrollment, that had a long period of stability ranging from about 1,100 to 1,175 students. And it really hasn't been until the last 4 years where we've seen a declining enrollment trend as some of those smaller elementary cohorts have moved into 6th grade. And at the high school level, high school is always the last grade grouping to experience any change in trends. And what we've seen is a consistent growth in high school enrollment up until 2021-22, or excuse me, 2021-22, most recent peak of 1,440 students with slight decreases over the last 2 years. We do a new to district student analysis to supplement our housing our townwide housing data analysis. This essentially looks at students who were in your student database this year, who were in it last year, and gives us a sense of how many new students are moving into the district in any given year. It doesn't account for students who may move out. But what we did see is that despite lower sales this year, we did see an uptick in the number of new to district students compared to last year, although it is still trending below the long-term average. The elementary grades saw the lowest number of new to district students, or the slowest growth in new to district students. It is at 93 this year, and that compares to an average of about 120 if we look at the 5 years prior to the pandemic. the middle school grades, we actually saw an increase in new district students this year at 61, which is the highest in recent memory. And the high school has been pretty consistent with about 40 over each of the last 4 years. We also do a neighborhood level analysis, looking at any neighborhood trends that may impact particular elementary schools. This map looks very similar to what we've shown in prior years, where it really reflects the density of housing within the community. Although there are some developments where they may show up as a home sale hotspot, but they may not be driving as many new students to the district. For example, I think it's Kensett up in the northwest corner near Stamford. Always a home sale hotspot, but isn't necessarily driving student migration. And then finally, we take a look at elementary school migration by school. And as I mentioned, this year is slightly below or slightly above last year, but still below that long-term average. And since 2016, Tokenique and Oxbridge have historically seen the largest number of new students in any given year. And for 2023, Oxbridge continues to have the highest number of new district students, followed by Royal and Tokenique. Although Oxbridge is still below that record cohort we saw in 2021-22 after the new school opened. So we use the cohort survival methodology, which is the industry standard accepted by the state as part of school construction grant applications. I won't belabor the methodology too much. One change this year is the new kindergarten entry date, which becomes effective for next school year, where the cutoff date shifts from January 1st to September 1st. And so we have a period where we're going to have a smaller eligibility window for kindergarten, although the state has allowed a waiver process. One of the challenges for projecting kindergarten next year is that it's difficult to anticipate how many families are going to request waivers who were born after September 1st. Most of the communities that we've talked to are anticipating being pretty lenient on the exception process. It really comes down to how many families are going to request it. And then we will assume that those students will all enroll in kindergarten. We did look at your historic kindergarten classes, and about 10% usually turn 5 after that new kindergarten entry date. So about 34 students next year may enroll in kindergarten through the exception process. And we've incorporated different assumptions in our 3 models. So our low model, we're assuming only 40% of those students are going to enroll next year. The medium assumes 60% and the high 80%. But especially for the kindergarten cohort next year, we recommend referring to both the low, medium, and high projections to get a range of what that kindergarten number might be, especially as you're planning around FTEs. So looking at our projections assumptions, like previous years, we prepare a high, medium, and low with differing assumptions on student births and in-migration. And for the high model, we're assuming those high levels of births we saw in 2021 and 2022 will continue, and you'll see higher than average in-migration. The medium model, which is our recommended model, shows births remaining high, but not quite that record we saw back in 21 and 22 at 235 annually, and student migration slightly below the historic 5-year average. The low projections assume the lowest number of births and the lowest amount of migration. This just shows our persistency ratios, which show how much a grade grows or shrinks as it moves from grade to grade. A number over 1 means it grows. A number less than 1 indicates that it shrinks. But I guess the most important thing we look at here is the estimated migration, which is whether or not your elementary and middle grades grow or shrink on average. And what we've seen, again, over the last 5 years is that you are experiencing net in-migration, which is carried forward in our projections. For kindergarten, we have developed a methodology that allows us to factor for the impact of in-migration in your kindergarten classes. This methodology worked well this past year, being within a handful of kindergarten students. But the gist is that as the number of births goes down, in-migration plays an increasing role in your kindergarten enrollment. And you can see that in the chart on the left, where the blue bars indicate the number of births 5 years prior, the green bars indicate student migration. And as births have decreased, we've seen increased migration enrolling in your kindergarten classes. Getting into our district-wide projections, our high and medium models are both showing similar overall trends with modest growth over the next 5 years, and then continuing over the 5 and 10-year horizon. What you'll notice is the gap between the high and the low models is quite small over the first 5 years, and that broadens over the last 5 years as the model becomes more reliant on some of those assumptions. The medium model, we are projecting to increase slowly to about 5,670 students by the midpoint of our projections, and then grow again modestly, reaching just over 4,800 students by 2033. This is just a by grade breakdown where we're anticipating, while overall enrollment is anticipated to grow slowly, we are anticipating greater growth rates at the elementary level of about 5.7%, reaching 2,230 students by the midpoint of the projections, and then increasing to just under 2,300 students by 2023-24. Middle school enrollment, we're anticipating to increase more slowly and reaching over 1,100 students by 2030. And finally, the high school, we're anticipating a decline over the next 4 years as some of those smaller cohorts currently in late elementary and middle school move into the high school, and then eventually rebound to just over 1,350 students. We've prepared individual elementary school projections as well. This just shows the medium model, and this incorporates the students generated from recently completed and future housing developments as well. So we're anticipating the greatest growth in Tokenique, and much of that growth is driven by the completion of the Corbin District project and the Parklands project. Continued growth is projected at Ox Ridge, although not at the same rate that you saw when the new school opened back in 2021. Holmes is projected to grow by about 20 students over the next 5 years, while Hindley is projected to be a little bit more stable before seeing some growth in the latter years. And then Royal is anticipated to see some modest growth over the full 10-year period, and we did lower some of the student generation assumptions this year as the Darien Commons project was partially occupied. And then we prepared by school and by grade. So getting into our takeaways, we did revise the projections down slightly due to fewer housing sales and lower student generation from recent housing. And so every year it's kind of a fine-tuning process. We're still recommending the medium model as the most likely long-term trajectory in terms of facilities planning. Looking at the 1-year outlook, we're anticipating overall stable enrollment, slight increases at the elementary level, and slight decreases at the middle and high school level. Looking out to the next 5 years, elementary schools are projected to increase by about 6%. The middle school increases by about 3%, and the high school declines by about 3%. And then beyond 5 years, we are anticipating modest growth to continue for the second half of the projections, with elementary and middle school growing modestly, and the high school experiencing a rebound once it reaches its low in about year 5. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
John?
Thank you, Patrick. One of the follow-up questions, I don't know if you got it, was to break out the 2-bedroom and the 3 bedrooms, because it seems, you know, if you look at the Commons, it's not performing like Avalon did. And I think the difference, I mean, there's some design elements certainly that are different, but there's a number of 3-bedroom apartments that I think attracted families at Avalon. So when you, I mean, it's 2 parts, you know, can you help us understand how many 3-bedroom apartments are coming online? You broke out the 2 and 3 bedroom together. But maybe talk about, you know, the underperformance of the Commons and how you applied that to the Norotan Heights redevelopment, and as well as Corbin.
Sure. Yeah. So thank you for sending your question ahead of time. I was able to get some answers on the 3 bedrooms. So for comparison, Avalon, about 20% of the units at Avalon are 3 bedrooms. And then it has roughly equal numbers of 1 and 2 bedrooms. So overall, we're looking at about 1.8 bedrooms per unit at Avalon, which is why we ended up applying that only to the 2 and 3 bedroom units, knowing that 1 bedroom units are probably not going to be producing many students, especially in those transit oriented locations. For the recently completed projects and planned projects, I believe only one of the 4 had any 3 bedroom units. It was the Norotan Heights Shopping Center. It had 9 4 3 bedroom units, with the remainder of as 2, and then no 3 bedroom units at the other large projects.
Okay, so then as you're projecting 110 out of the lot on that slide 12, or it's 109, I think. How did you adjust downward? Like if we were looking at that last year, what was the projection?
I don't have the number last year, but what we did do is apply a much lower student generation rate for the studio and 1 bedroom units, which is 152 of the 362 total. Whereas the 2 and 3 bedroom units, we assume the same student generation rate as last year. I could certainly follow up and get that for you if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, it seems the 2 bedroom units at the Commons certainly weren't generating what was projected. I know the projections were based on Avalon, but the Avalon was more 3 bedrooms. So I just don't want to make the mistake as we project out for the new Norotan Heights Shopping Center, as well as Corbin. And Corbin already has some units that have been complete. I don't think there are any kids being generated out of the first phase, if I'm not mistaken, but.
Yeah, certainly something we'll be tracking as
Okay.
they lease up.
And then when you look at that 109 over the next, it was, I didn't do the math. What's the projected growth? How long did you spread them out, I guess, is the question. So if I'm going to go annualize it, look at the growth, what percentage driven by the new construction yet?
Sure. So I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but we usually do a multi-year phase in for each project. So 3 or 4 years, we'll assume, 25%
Okay.
added each year.
After they're complete though, right?
Yes, because
Okay, so
usually
there's okay.
Yeah, so usually by, year 4 or 5, it'll be fully accounted for in that model.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So year 4 or 5 gets us to 109 students, or it starts at 109 and you're adding at that rate?
So some projects we're adding in sooner because of their completion timeline. So working with the town planner, he gave us an estimated schedule for when these projects may come online. So some we're adding students next year, some we may not be adding until 2 or 3 years from now. I can certainly follow up and tell you when we have the full 109 in the projections. We are ramping up to the 109, and then once we stay at the 109, we stay there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dave?
I know you're recommending the median model. Does anybody in this analysis do the next step and then assign probability weightings between high, medium, and low, and likeliness?
So it all depends on the underlying trends. So given what we've seen in housing sales this year, you may trend towards the low for a year, but if sales rebound, you may trend towards the high for a year. So there's always kind of a wave where, long-term, you're probably going to be about the medium, but any given year, you may trend towards the low or the high, depending on conditions.
Right. So for the likelihood, I mean, you're recommending the median. I think that's 50% right, 80% right. I mean,
It's not
over a 5-year term.
It's not a probabilistic, it's an assumption-driven model, right? So we think it's most likely based on all the data that we looked at compared to the other 2.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Looking at the kindergarten caveats and assumptions, when you said the 40, 60, 80 for, that's slide 25, it's a small number, but is that 40, 60, 80 high, medium, low what you are just using across the board, or is that something based specifically in Darien? Where do you get that?
Yeah, so that's something where it really is assumption driven. We've talked to a lot of superintendents, and that's, we have different ranges we use for different districts. With your low share of 4-year-olds, that leads us to believe that Darien may see more students not getting exceptions compared to some districts where we may have 25% of our students as 4-year-olds. So generally, we're looking at about 60 to 80% for the median model across our many clients.
Okay, thank you. Julie?
When we talk about births, we're talking about births in the town of Darien. Is that correct?
To resident mothers in Darien, yes.
Okay, so, because it looks kind of stable what the numbers end up being for kindergarten, but harder to predict based on when individuals move to town, so to speak. And so the kind of pandemic boon of people coming to the burbs maybe earlier in their timeline than they might have anticipated might have led to a higher rate of births being recorded in the town of Darien. So we adjust for that, I assume, as those births are now going to be getting ready to go to kindergarten.
Exactly. So it gets back to that relationship between migration and births, where when births are higher, migration plays a smaller role in your kindergarten enrollment. When births are low, migration plays a greater part. So in the years where we have a jump in births, it's not a one-to-one jump in kindergarten enrollment, because we're anticipating that it may be families who, instead of moving to Darien after they were born here instead.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Greg, I just want to make sure I haven't missed you. You good? Okay. Any other questions? No, thank you so
Thank you.
very much. We appreciate your
Thank you,
time.
Patrick. Thanks very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, discussion and possible acceptance of contemplated gift from the Darien Foundation. Dr. Adley.
We have Colleen Thompson here, who's our Director of Music, is going to speak to us, and I'm thrilled that we have this gift before the board this evening from the Darien Foundation. Erin Posey is also on, I think she's watching remotely if we want someone from the foundation, but this is a gift in the amount of 313,000, which is significantly generous. That completes the video wall at the high school auditorium. I'm tremendously excited about this, and not just about the generosity, but the actual content of the gift itself. But I'll let Colleen speak to it, and we'll open the floor for discussion from the board thereafter.
Sure. As Dr. Adley said, we are incredibly grateful to the Darien Foundation for their generous offer to donate an LED video wall with electric hoist system in the DHS auditorium. I spoke about this potential during budget presentations last year. And since then, we've been working closely with the foundation and with Met Interactive, the firm that is currently installing the board-approved audio and video upgrades in the auditorium. And they have been working with us to plan for the installation of the wall, which will be 40 feet wide and 20 feet high, covering the entire back wall of the stage. It will be mounted on an electric hoist system so that it can be raised above the stage when not in use. This will be helpful to keep it safe from any potential damage on the stage when it's not being used. And it'll also allow us to maximize the use of the stage rather than having it permanently installed. The video wall will greatly improve the auditorium as a state-of-the-art performance and presentation space. It will also transform the auditorium into an innovative teaching and learning environment, as it will be used for arts classes and STEM classes across disciplines. Should the donation be accepted, we will work with Met to purchase and install the video wall so that it will be available for next school year.
So as part of the, sorry.
Go ahead.
As part of the gift, I just want to point out, just in line with gifts and grant requests, the board policy talks about not bringing on anticipated costs to the school district. It will place no restrictions on the school program. So I have delineated here some of the criteria and contingencies that has come along with the request from the foundation. I don't believe it should stop it, but that being said, I wanted to point that out. In particular, number 3, which is the annual service agreement of 12,800. We can relatively comply with all of these requests because it's in keeping with the program and what we would normally do. It would be our suggestion that we would put that in the budget for this upcoming year.
More than suggestion, it would be a requirement.
Yes.
Yeah, so if we accept it. So I'll open it to board questions, but before I do, I'd like to thank the Darien Foundation for their tremendous support. This is a really exciting initiative we were excited to hear about during budget season. We're thrilled that the foundation has come forward with a donation. Are there any specific questions about the gift? John?
I'm just a little interested in the service agreement that will maintain it in working order. I mean, it's just I mean, what are they doing to the video hall, I guess, for $12,000 a year? I'm just wondering.
Sure. So it's the proposal is that they would be available to inspect the video wall and the hoist system specifically. It's, you know, we're raising 20 by 40 video wall, 50 feet in the air.
Yeah.
So to make sure that we can continue doing that safely. So it would include that inspection. It would also include emergency servicing. So, you know, in case, for example, we would look to potentially replace a lot of our physical sets for our big shows with virtual sets. So they would inspect the wall prior to those productions to make sure they're in working order. And let's say, you know, a week before the show, we have a lightning strike, then they would be available to do emergency servicing. And then the other thing that often comes up with these products, although they're very durable, individual panels often lose pixels. And so with the service agreement, rather than having to do a major repair or reinstallation, they could come immediately with part in hand and do a very simple repair rather than have to do a more costly repair down the line.
Thank you. And just the hoisting, is that going to be Mr. DeMayo in the back, or like, is that how you?
Yeah. So when they install
Not
it,
manually, I'm assuming.
no, it's electric. It's an electric hoist, but it requires you know, someone to actually move to start the process, but then a spotter to make sure that we can do it safely. So it would require 1 or 2 people to do it.
Thank you.
Dave?
Hi, so in the board packet we received, there is something called warranty example. I don't know if this is our actual contract will be in effect or not in effect, or what's going to happen, but it says it's a 1 year only, which for a piece of capital like this sounds rather short. So I don't know if we're looking into that at all as we look through, or if this is the real contract, or if there's something different that might be in place, or we should ask for an extension.
All right, Mr. Brown, are you talking about this contract here? Sorry, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
In the paperwork from Met Interactive, yes?
Yeah.
Sure.
So I don't know if that's the offer of the contract or what this is for the vehicle, but.
We can, yeah.
We can certainly inquire.
Sarah?
Couple more questions about that $12,800. Is that if they come out 0 times? Is that if they come out 100 times? Or is that just a flat fee for a year? And then also, what are the odds that would increase year after year after year? How often does that price go up?
They provided us with a contract that we can accept. We can also possibly negotiate, but my understanding, all of the details of the service contract are laid out in advance. And I think we would talk more about the service contract itself during the budget process.
Service contracts typically, if they come out once or if they come out 100 times, it's the same amount of money. We have similar things for like basketball hoops at the gymnasium. They don't typically go up more than, you know, a couple % a year if they do. But whether they come out once or they come out 100, it's going to be the 12,000.
Thank you.
Do we know the approximate lifetime of the wall? And can we talk a little bit about safety? I heard you say, you know, that we'll have someone spot it, but could you expand on the safety measures that are in place for something of this size?
Sure. So in our discussions with Met and as I was presenting it to the foundation, we were talking about 10 to 15 years. And it's 10 to 15 years is typical in the industry for LED that's in use 24/7. So, you know, this would be, and we're talking about more limited use where we would use it, you know, lower it for productions and shows and classes that require projection. And in terms of safety, that has been the biggest thing that we're working on with engineers right now. So Met and all of our current staff will make sure that all of this can be done safely, and you know, the inspections will happen yearly. And, we do currently have drops and heavy equipment, flying above the stage at all times. So all of our current safety measures and inspections will continue. But they also include training. So we'll make sure that everyone operating the wall will be able to do so safely. And, students will never be operating the wall, raising or lowering it without, period. So that, period.
Period. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Robin?
I was just looking at the the exclusions in the contract. I'm assuming that the auditorium renovation is going to allow the load capacity that's necessary for the LED wall, just from an electrical standpoint. And that's actually part of the auditorium renovation that is outside of this cost. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then also, I just had a question. The new course that we're going to be talking about tonight that gets into theater technology, is the anticipation that students would be trained to learn how to operate, not the hoisting, but the use of the LED designs for set production, et cetera. I think
Yes.
that would be a relevant part of the course.
That would be a major part of new courses, and we would include it into some current courses as well throughout the high school, arts classes and STEM classes.
How would arts classes use it? I'm just curious. Is that to display student art?
Sure. So in terms of arts, I'm kind of referring to art, visual and performing arts in arts. But when we talk about the digital drawing and design class later, we are looking to get some training on how we could potentially collaborate so that our digital artists could make designs that could then be used by theater students when they're producing their sets. And it could be used as a display. For example, we had a program a few years ago where the band was playing a piece inspired by Picasso, and we had some students curate artwork by Picasso, and that was done just with basic projection. But with this wall, we have huge potential for visual and performing arts to be combined for presentations and performances.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Katie?
That sounds so cool.
Thank you.
I'm so excited about that. I just wanted to echo your sentiments, Jill, with gratitude to the Darien Foundation for this, and also just to say that I very much appreciated the detail in the submission of the gift for acceptance, and that it was really helpful to see the specific things laid out, and that I just appreciate them being a great partner and understanding how it all works.
Agreed. All right. With that, may I have a motion to accept the contemplated gift from the Darien Foundation for an LED wall, video wall for the Darien High School auditorium? That is Julie, seconded by Robin. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, Colleen, for
everyone.
your
Thank-
leadership on this. Thank you to the Darien Foundation, and thank you, Alan and team. Okay. Presentation and discussion of fiscal year 25 core expenditures, Dr. Adley and Rich Rudel.
So the board had asked us to put together preliminary numbers regarding what the budget was looking like, just if we essentially had to roll things forward, typically, as we would call in Mr. Davis's terms, core expenditures. So we are just giving the board a wee prelude this evening as to the scale of the challenge as we roll in some of our commitments, and to show you what kind of the conundrum is and what some of the numbers look like. So with that, I'll turn it over to Richard.
Just before he jumps in, I think a lot of people have heard core and growth, but just to be clear, so core expenditures, you're just talking about if we just move the budget forward. Growth would be any sort of new budgetary initiatives. So there is no new budgetary initiative. This is just if you move the needle forward 1 year, what we already know. Correct, Rich?
Correct. Yep.
And that's core. Thank you.
So just to talk about some of the contractual drivers, obviously we have salary agreements with our teachers union and our administrative unions. And then some of our non-certified contracts, nurses, maintenance, custodians, secretaries, and paraprofessionals. Health insurance, as always, will be a big driver. We just heard the demographer report, so enrollment will be a driver within the budget. Our bus contract is up at the end of the school year and is out currently to bid. We are expecting the bid results December 5th, but we do expect that to be a big driver in the budget, given what other contracts in the area have been. We also have some smaller drivers that are non-personnel contracts, such as the cleaning contract at the high school. We do have a custodial bid that locked in prices from 3 years ago that expires June 30th. And so next year we'll be at current rate prices. So we do expect a large jump in custodial supplies. There's the contract at the Fitch building for the Fitch lease, and then Kerma and software contracts. And then we have special education drivers, including the new legislation that extended education services to age 22. The special education shortfalls that we've discussed at the board and finance committees carrying over to next school year, and then new IEP placements pending for fiscal year 25. And then we have a small amount of grant compression going into next year. So the three primary drivers that we're going to see are the collective bargaining agreements, health insurance. We do have very high claims. They're about at 135% loss ratio. So that means for every dollar we're spending, Anthem's actually paying out $1.35. And then special education is going to be a large driver in the budget next year as well. So the context for the contracts with the DEA, the teachers and the administrators, we talked about this when the contracts were approved, but the DEA settlement was to address recruitment and retention. That's been a big theme over the last couple of years to recognize the hard work and dedication of our teachers. We also wanted to be more competitive at the low end of the salary schedule to attract new teachers. And just over the course of the last 3 years, Darien's lost 33% of its teachers. And so the goal of that contract was to kind of stem that turnover. The DAA settlement was again to address recruitment and retention, another theme going into next year, to recognize the hard work and dedication of our administrators across the district. We also wanted to become more competitive at the lower level administrator positions, such as assistant principals. And it's important to note 47% of administrators turned over during the course of the previous agreement. So this agreement that was approved at the last meeting was to kind of, again, stem that tide of the turnover. So if we look at salaries, the DEA will be about just shy of 2.2 million. So that's a 1.9% increase on your budget next year. The DAA will be just under 400,000. So that's a 0.34% on our budget. The non-certified staff, we are showing it at the high end of 684,000. We do have 2 unsettled contracts going into next year, the paraprofessionals and secretaries. So that obviously will fluctuate. It could go higher, it could go lower, but we're pegging that at a total of 0.6. And then ESY next year will be longer next year, just the way the calendar falls. And so we have $288,000 of additional expenditures. So just those wages alone, we're looking at a budget above 3% at 3.09. Health insurance, as I mentioned, our claims have continued to get worse over the last couple of years. We no longer have a rate cap with Anthem. If you recall, in the last 2 budget cycles, we did have a rate cap that capped the growth of health insurance. They're no longer willing to do that. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a 135% loss ratio. So again, every dollar we pay out, Anthem's paying out $1.35. So we did look at other models, whether it's going in the state plan. Though right now the state plan is slightly more expensive and is also a concern because the state doesn't actually set rates until May, which is after the board's budget's done. It is also operating at a large deficit in the state. And so the state had to bail out the state partnership plan. We've also looked at self-insurance. So if we look at some of our neighboring communities like New Canaan and Wilton, they're self-insured. Though self-insurance isn't the silver bullet to health insurance. If we look at some districts that had self-insurance like New Canaan, they actually pay more for insurance than we do. But we would have to have a stop-loss insurance, which would exceed about $3 million annually. Dental, we are actually self-insured for. But we are right now expecting claims to go up 12.5% next year. Vision, we are fully insured, and we do have an RFQ waiting. But right now, we're looking at an 18% renewal for vision insurance. And so the total of that insurance bucket is a little over 1.5 million. We just looked at the demographer report. So next year, based on that demographer report, we are anticipating 1 new section across the 5 elementary schools. And so that will be a cost of $113,000 or 1/10% of the budget. Bus contract, as I mentioned, We did put an RFP out. We are waiting for the results on December 5th. We, in this are including a 10% rate increase. If we look across Fairfield County, increases have ranged anywhere from 3% to 10%. Historically, over the last 15 years, Darien has only gotten one submission for a bid, and that's been for a student. And that's largely because we don't have a bus depot. So when you don't have a bus depot, a lot of bus companies won't actually submit a bid because they'd have to have a large capital infusion to actually create a bus depot. So if we look at districts like Newtown, they had a 10% increase. Stanford just had a 6.5% increase. So while we might not be at 10% when it all comes in, we are expecting it to be much larger than the previous contract. And so you'll see the various areas, whether it's home to school, special education, out of district, or athletics. And so that's another $400,000 on the budget. I mentioned those non-personnel contracts. The KERMA contracts, which are workers' comp, property insurance, liability insurance, is about 4%. We do have an outside cleaning contract at the high school. The minimum wage has gone up in the state of Connecticut. And so that is impacting that cleaning contract, and that'll go up over 6%. The garbage contract was put out to bid this year, and the low bid was for an annual increase of 7%. The actual next lowest bid was double the price of the current contract that we have. The Fitch lease is going up just under 5%, and then our software, existing software contracts are going up about 2.5%. Special education, as we've talked about this year, there is a need for additional paraprofessional support based on the current contract. That is about 0.73% increase in the budget. The legislative changes, extending the age to 22 is another 0.13% on our budget. The IEPs and unilateral placements from this year are another 0.41%. And then we have contractual increases on tuition, speech, OT, and PT. That's another 0.5 point on our budget. And then we have anticipated placements. This is where you might see a little bit of range because those placements may or may not occur, but that's another 0.5%. So all those items alone are 2.3% on our budget. Grant compression. So the board did approve the position of a wellness coordinator this year. As we mentioned, we were going to fund that position through the ARP grant. That grant is expiring at the end of the school year. We did receive another grant, the mental health grant, which will cover a third or 2/3, excuse me, of that wellness coordinator. So a third of that position will have to come into the budget for next year. And then the year after, 2/3, and the year after that, fully into the budget. So if we look at the breakdown, again, the DEA contract is 1.9%. The DAA contract is 0.34. The non-certifieds could range anywhere from about 0.4 to 0.6. ESY, because of the calendar, is another 0.25 point. The payroll taxes associated with those contracts are another 0.14. Health, dental, and vision are another 1 to 1.89%, depending on when we land. Enrollment is 0.1 point. The bus contract, again, depending on how the RFP looks, between 1.18 and 0.36. Those non-personnel contracts are 0.07. The grant compression is small, but 0.02. And then special education, depending on those potential placements, anywhere from 1.7 to 2.3. So we're looking at a core expenditure ranging anywhere from 6.13% to 8.02. While not approved by the board, but because it is an item on the agenda for later tonight, we did show what potential revenue could be. So obviously that would bring down the budget, but right now we're looking at core expenditures between 6 and 8%.
More comments and questions? Robin?
I have a question about the healthcare assumptions. Obviously, you're talking about the loss ratio of 135%, and the range you show up there, 1.01 to 1.89%. You mentioned that you're budgeting a 15% increase for Anthem. Is that locked in, or is the range due to the fact that it might actually be more than that? Or
So we are not locked in. We did put out a request for quotes. And so we reached out to about 3 or 4 companies and said, what would you quote us at based on what our trailing 18 of claims would be? The high came in at 30%. Anthem came in at 15%. So that's what we're using. We're not locked in yet. A lot will depend on what our October claims look like and our November claims look like. So if we're lucky and we have good claims in October and November, it could fall potentially to 12 or 13%. That's why you see that little bit of a lower number. Again, we also put out an RFP for vision. And so that could also go down or lower or higher depending on it. So we use that 15% because that's at least what the initial quote came in.
But what would make it move up to 1.89%?
Worst claims in October and November.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
Greg.
Hey, I just have a few questions. I think you mentioned that one of the drivers of some of the increases was related to trying to get turnover, reducing turnover going forward. Do you have available turnover stats for nearby districts, or like what the normal turnover levels are? That's the first question. And then another question is just related to the higher claims that you mentioned. What's driving those claims higher? And then I think you mentioned that you looked at potentially doing self-insurance, and that was a higher cost option. Is there the potential to partner with other districts to look at self-insurance in combination as well? Or do we just look at it for just Darien?
Sure. So in terms of the claims, what's really driving our high claim and our cancer claims for both obviously employees, spouse, and then the children of employees. We have over 50 claims that have exceeded $150,000. We've had actually one claim that exceeded $1 million. So those pool of claims are really what's driving our costs. We are part of a consortium with a number of communities, not necessarily in Fairfield County, but in Connecticut. And it's really a purchasing block. And so what that block does is it goes out to the different insurance companies and says, we can offer you a book of business of, 80, 90, $100 million. In effect, if we give you $100 million worth of business, we would like a lower rate. And so that block has actually helped us, especially in the last 2 years where we had a rate cap of 7% and then 8%. So we're still part of that block, and there are communities that would like us to not be a part of that block after this year. But we are still part of that block, and that has helped us greatly. In terms of turnover stats, I don't have what other districts are. I'm sure we can ask around and see what they're seeing with the shortage of teachers throughout Connecticut is affecting Fairfield County. Really what you're seeing now is more like districts kind of like trading teachers. And there aren't really any new teachers to come back. So what's happening is if we lose a teacher, let's say to Wilton, then, maybe Wilton's losing somebody to Weston, and then somebody's losing somebody to Westport. And it's kind of just like a game of musical chairs, but nobody's new is really coming in. And so what ends up happening is we lost 74 teachers last year, and this year we've lost 64. We're just not hiring new teachers anymore. So where it used to be maybe a teacher left at 115,000 and you replace them at 60 or 65, that teacher who's leaving at 115,000, now you're replacing them at 110,000.
So part of, part of this year's budget deficit is in the turnover line because we're not, we assumed less experienced teachers at less salary would come in, but, we are seeing a little less turnover, but they're coming in at similar levels of the teachers that left.
Dave, did you have something?
Yeah, I think Greg got it, but just in the idea, you mentioned that self-insurance is not a silver bullet. When we look at sort of self-insurance option, is there a consortium or block option that's available if we go that route with others? And I guess the pool size is going to be significantly smaller than the block we're in.
Sure.
So I don't know if there's very much efficiencies there.
So for self-insurance, there's not really a pool that you can join because nobody wants to pool their claims. There was an effort a few years ago to have a block of people to get self-insurance, to get stop-loss insurance, and that kind of fell apart when a lot of districts weren't willing to do it. So the big problem with us going to self-insurance is just the prohibitive cost of stop-loss insurance. And so you can peg that stop-loss insurance at whatever dollar amount you want, whether you want it to be 150 or 250. Obviously, the higher you go, the less the premium you pay and the more of the liability that you have to take on. Because our claims are not good and that we have such a large number of claims in that like 50 pool of people that have hit, 100,000, 200,000, $500,000 to $1 million, it makes going to self-insurance not an optimal time. It doesn't mean we may not go self-insurance 2, 3, 4 years down the road, but we really need those claims to kind of subside. If we look at districts in the area right now, so in our district, Ridgefield right now has the best claims in the area, and they're fully insured. If we look at Westport, for example, they just got hit with a 14% renewal rate, which is similar to what we're looking at, and they're self-insured.
What are those claims rates, just for comparison, just to have a sense, if you know them?
So for Westport, I don't know. For Ridgefield, they were running at like 90%. So they were actually getting a dividend check back from their insurance provider.
Thanks, Rich.
Julie. Oh, that's not a raise. John.
I just wanted to point out that if you look at the salary and benefits and, up to that 7.47 line, or look at the range, that represents about 60 to 68% of, the total baked in, if you will, increase. So that's where a bulk of it's coming from.
So I think part of what we wanted to do was allow the board and the members of the public to see where we're starting as we rev up for budget process, for the budget season. And this isn't a budget discussion, but it is an opportunity for all of us to understand what the start looks like. So I do think, Alan, you have your work cut out for you.
We do, yes.
Yes. I imagine you'll be doing a lot of using dollars you already have in different ways. All right. Any other comments? No, okay. Discussion and possible action on proposed new courses for Darien High School for the 2024-2025 school year. I'll turn it over to Dr. Fedigan and Ms. Dunn. But of course, while these are not the largest budget drivers, they didn't come up in our last spreadsheet. Part of why they show up here at this time is because we talk about them now and that because they would be effectively paid for during the budget cycle. So, but of course, this is an academic discussion here tonight. Thank you.
Just thank you again to the staff for staying around. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn.
Good evening. Thank you, Ms. McCammon, and thank you, Ellen, for being here and for the rest of our staff who's here tonight. I'll just provide a brief overview. Michelle, would you mind putting the slides up for the new course proposals? There you go. She's fast. And thank you for reframing that. Jill, this is an academic discussion. We're happy to talk with the board, Mr. Shirley, about the whole new course proposal, which would, of course, in some senses, be a budgetary driver with regard to either textbooks or technology, certainly curriculum writing and professional learning. And we're happy to take questions. But prior to really digging into what each of the courses might offer tonight, it's really important, I think, for the board and the public to see that great care and thought goes into planning new courses. One of the things that I really learned about being new to the process at Darien High School with the Curriculum Council is the opportunity for the teachers to have voice and hearing actually from the students about what they might like to learn about, how they might like to see the curriculum differentiated for their interests and what the staff might be interested in teaching. Of course, always aligned to the standards. One of the things that's also important to notice, Michelle, if you can just advance that slide, is the alignment in the design of these courses to the district mission, vision, core values, and those attributes of the vision of the graduate that we're looking for opportunities for not only our students, but our staff to experience on a daily basis across our 7 schools. When we think about developing new courses, there's a variety of factors that go into that rationale. I already mentioned a few, namely student interests and student needs. I loved how Ms. Dunn described students are voting with their feet. We like to see what student trend data looks like and hear from our students about what they'd like to learn. We think about the staff professional expertise. We also, of course, need to think about graduation requirements, which are seemingly changing year over year. Of course, we know that our vision of the graduate is in great alignment to the graduation requirements, and that is, I think, a more important driver actually to think about. Graduation requirements are certainly a compliance driver, but our vision of the graduate, I think, speaks to a bigger focus and hope for our students in Darien Public Schools. Always we're thinking about the standards and frameworks. What do we want students to know and be able to do as they proceed through each grade? And something that I'm looking forward to talking with administration and board about is having even more defined learning pathways for our students. And so these are all of the things that we think about when we're exploring the opportunities for new potential courses. We have for the board's consideration tonight and for discussion, as we discussed at Curriculum Council very recently, 5 new courses. Mrs. Dunn will give us an overview of those 5 courses, and then we do have our dedicated staff on hand tonight to answer any particular questions, should there be any, for each of those 5. So I'll turn it over to Mrs. Dunn.
Thank you. I would like to thank the board first for supporting the vibrant curriculum at the high school that meets the needs of our students and offers a tremendous amount of choice for pathways and passions for them to follow. In the memo that I shared, There are a few small changes that we put forward to Curriculum Council. Drawing and Painting 1 and Graphic Design 2, should the new art course be approved, would be pulled from the record, from the course catalog. The new English course being proposed is going to replace British literature, so that course would also be eliminated. We're proposing the web design and app development courses, which are currently separate courses, to be combined as one course. If we go forward with the digital drawing class, that would remove Drawing and Painting 1. Therefore, Drawing and Painting 2 and 3 would have to be renamed in order to make sense in the catalog. We're also requesting that we pursue the UConn ECE credit for our Spanish course, Hispanic Culture Through Arts. That's a wonderful opportunity for our students to gain college credit. And then we would also have American Sign Language 2 following the course that was added this year. So for the new courses, the first is Digital Drawing and Design, and we have a short video clip for you to share to our students using the technology that would be a big part of this course. Annika Mengwell and Cam Meyer. They say more than I can possibly say about it, so.
Can I come back to it? I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. We'll come back and we'll go on to, no. Sorry, Michelle, we're not forwarding. There we go. Yeah. Okay. The English electives and literature, are offered for senior year, and the new course, Through the Looking Glass, imaginative literature, is being proposed by the department, allowing students to step out of the boundaries of reality in some ways and explore literature that is creative in storytelling and fiction and fantasy. The department is always looking for ways to bring the choices here in the senior elective and adding courses that are responsive to the student interest. We would expect, one of the questions that came up, we'd expect about 1 or 2 sections of this course to run. Theatrical storytelling, design and technology. This is an really interesting and wonderful offering, we think. Truly an interdisciplinary course that combines the art of storytelling and bringing that story to the stage. And so we would have our students doing the design, costume design, structure of the presentation, and really bring this play or piece of writing to life on the stage. Again, likely 1 or 2 sections. Anatomy and physiology. The video, okay.
My name is Anna. And I've been using the Wacom independently after I was introduced to it because I was at Darien High School and I loved using it. I mainly use the Wacom for cartooning. So I have a lot of little doodles and sketches on notes and paper that I don't want to lose, but I want to make more official. But it could just be something like on a Post-it that I liked or drew a character. So I take pictures of them and I can put them into Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator and use those and directly trace over them to preserve them more permanently in a digital format. I mainly use Adobe Photoshop and also Adobe Illustrator to work digitally. And how it works is you just open it on your device, you plug in the Wacom, you drag the screen over, the Wacom just kind of functions as another monitor, and you can work very easily. Big pro about the Wacom too, and why I switched to it when it comes to cartooning is when I write my comics. If you're working on paper and you need to add in a new panel, you have to basically redraw every other page afterwards because the panels are sequential. So if you need to add a new one, you have to move every single other one over. But when you're working digitally, you can just select all your panels, move them over, draw a new one, and not have to redraw actually everything. A big reason why Wacom makes such a big difference over the iPad is the texture of the screen and its direct compatibility with the stylus. So when you're writing with one of the iPad pens on the iPad, they can vary in different textures and different kinds of tips. And there's some that are meant to be most responsive, but those end up, just nothing compares to the actual texture of the Wacom and also the size of the Wacom is really great relative to the iPad. You can work on such a big scale and really feel like you're actually drawing on paper. You can rest your hand on it and it doesn't respond to touch, it only responds to the stylus and it can pick up really subtle movements in the angle that are just like a pencil. So it's really incredible. There are many reasons why Darien High School needs a digital drawing class. Probably the most obvious is just the transforming society and how everything is becoming more technological these days. There's just increased need for digital designers, graphic designers, and creating this class is really going to introduce kids into that field and show them how fun it is. And also, if they're still not interested, it can open their eyes to the kind of work that a lot of people are doing. It's also a little bit less intimidating because you can work directly from photos and you can end up creating art that's arguably a lot better or more realistic. So kids will have increased confidence going into the art and they're more likely to want to stick around and continue being creative. Whereas if somebody characterizes themselves as just a bad artist, they might not continue on. But that's way less likely when it comes to working digitally. It also might appeal to more kids who consider themselves technological kids rather than artsy kids, because it's a fun way to show how being creative can also work in the STEM field. And it can introduce kids to all different kinds of art, and that art is not just drawing on paper, but there's all different kinds of art. Working digitally is just a lot less scary, a lot less intimidating, I think, for most people, because you can always just hit undo if you didn't like something, and you can keep retrying it, and you have the same blank slate. Also, if you want to experiment more, there's a lot more ability to do that.
Hi, my name is Kim Meyer. I'm a senior. Open a new file on my computer, connect my tablet, I can do a rough sketch, and then over that I can do like line art if I'm working on an illustration, and then on top of that do like color layers and everything. I can control the line thickness with the pen that goes with it, which is super cool. Where it's like since it's touch sensitive, which is another big thing. So overall, super helpful. So an iPad, if you rest your hand on the screen, it's going everywhere. It's gonna be a mess, and like you're not gonna do anything. Another big thing for Wacom is since you can connect it to your computer, you're using computer software and computer power, and like that's overall just better than almost any app you're gonna be able to get an iPad. Because for me, when I'm working on large projects, the iPad doesn't have enough storage to do it, and also the programs in it are generally worse programs. Where even if they're the same program, they function at a much lower capacity, in my opinion, and they have and their interfacing is much more difficult to use. Because I've invested so much of my own time into learning this, and it has paid off so well, because my drawing tablet and the amount of passion and time I spend drawing on it is what allowed me to do the vision of the graduate and what allowed me to take on a project. Because had I been doing it with a pen, but had I been doing it with like physical paper and a computer mask, it would not have looked pretty at all, and I probably would have gotten frustrated and given up, or I wouldn't even taken it on in the first place. So I wouldn't have realized how much fun digital drawing could be and how much I would enjoy the challenge. That's really.
So you can see that Cam is working on the visuals for our vision of the graduate for the district. Swaha has also done some work on these devices as well. So as far as the digital art is concerned, I think you can see the magic of hitting undo in our lives might be nice for all of us. And I think our students have really demonstrated that this is a foundational course. It can take our students on to AP. It combines digital drawing with pen and paper as well, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity. We were up to, I think, anatomy and physiology, a course that has been in high demand from our students for several years, and a course that is also interdisciplinary in nature within the sciences, combining biology and chemistry. And this will be a 300 level course, open to all juniors and seniors. And there's a tremendous amount of interest in medical fields and in anatomy and physiology. So we hope to run 1 or 2 sections of this course if approved. And finally, the AP Psychology, another course that is in very high interest for our students, very important to many, many careers that they will follow as they leave us and go on from high school. And another, I think, important feature of this course is that it's a very accessible AP course. For many students, it may be their first experience with a higher rigor of the college level course. So, and we would expect or predict 1 or 2 sections of this course as well. You see that the budgetary implications are included in each of the slides. Those have been put forward through our budgetary process to the superintendent at this point, and obviously are pending your approval. So thank you very much, and we'll take questions.
Sarah, do you want to talk a little bit about the curriculum subcommittee?
Sure.
first?
So we had a robust discussion about each of these classes, courses during our last curriculum committee meeting. The sense of the meeting was that these are all very valid courses to be adding to our course catalog. And there's some really exciting options here that, you know, listening to students, listening to what their needs are, their wants are, where, you know, the career pathways are heading as we enter through, you know, the mid 21st century, which seems crazy to think about. But so this is responsive to our students' needs. And just as a reminder, should these courses be approved, which the curriculum committee is suggesting be the case, this is not an approval of those budgetary numbers. This is not a guarantee this will go through this. It just means that the superintendent has the approval to put them into his budget.
Any questions about the courses? John?
It's partly budget oriented, but the Wacom, how many units are we talking about? How many?
I think we add 20 in there.
22 units, 21 computers, 21 units, sorry, 21 computers, 20 for students, 1 for the teacher, 22 tablets, so 1 for each station, and then 1 kind of additional tablet for students that are working maybe outside of that class, or for the other teacher teaching it to have access to it as well.
And what are you using now? I mean, you saw a model, is it a demo model or something?
We purchased 1 last year that we
Okay.
keep floating around between the 5 students and teachers that are actively using it daily.
Okay, and I guess from a curriculum standpoint, is there any way you could share 11 units amongst the class and still do the class, I guess is the question.
It would change how we were approaching
Yeah.
it from a classroom perspective, but because there is still that hands-on component to it and the digital piece and going back and forth, it's not the ideal way of how we'd want to start it, but it.
Could happen. Okay. Not, okay. Thank you.
Sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
was just gonna ask Swaha to share her experience.
So I use a Wacom at home as well for, drawing posters, cartooning, and I use it to make introducing events as well. But aside from the art students who have a chance to use this tablet, I also have friends who are into like engineering and graphic design outside of an artistic standpoint who would be interested in taking a class like this, especially because there's a learning curve to know how to use like Adobe Photoshop, how to control tablets and such like that. So I think it's amazing in the sense it's not just for art students, and like having this course available would be like interdisciplinary.
Thanks. That's great input.
Expanding on that a little bit, is this the only course that these tablets would be used for? Kind of to Swaha's point of this having potentially an interdisciplinary.
You answer it. So I would look at this as it's learning a new tool. So it's like we learn oil paint, we learn ink drawing in different stages of our drawing and painting pathways. Once they have access to this, which is happening in the second course level, which we're replacing where drawing and painting 1 is, students would be able to come back to this in what would become drawing and painting 2 and drawing and painting 3, and then AP have access to the facilities and have access to the materials. So it's not a once and done. It also, because of where this course is falling and replacing both graphic design 2 and drawing and painting 1, and those are in 2 separate pathways towards AP, we would have students that are in the digital photography pathway that would also have access to it. So it's more than just that one section to be used by 2 different AP groups.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up, just taking it further, I mean, is there any way a STEM student can come and play with it, if you will, or?
So we have many hundreds of Adobe licenses across the district. So if any student that has the Adobe license is able to come in and would have access to this. We like to keep an open studio model in our facilities so that students, when they have a free period, are able to come in and create during that time.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for this. Can you talk a little bit about how durable these tablets are? Like, would we need to replace one every 6 months? And just talk to, like, if kids would students be able to take them home? What do you think? How do you think they would be?
The home piece is really tricky. That would not be where I would go. I think the way our second tier courses are designed, or second level courses are designed, that doesn't have as much take home work as our advanced and AP level courses. So that's not part of the plan right now. Does a student want to have that and take that home? Then that would be a different conversation. It'd be like how we loan out our digital cameras, that there's, an assumed responsibility with it, a family assumed responsibility if they're going to take them home. And it's one of those things that I find that students, once they love it, and if a parent knows that their child likes it, they're going to potentially purchase one for them that they would have at home, just like they have a set of oil paints at home that might be different than what we're using at school.
Okay. And you're choosing the Wacom. Is there a different model? Clearly, the iPad is, which the students have shared that is not appropriate. But is
Those
there
are kind of the 2 most common, the Wacom or the iPad model, and we had a lot of department conversations about which way to go, and we went Wacom.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. We have on the agenda to approve these courses as a bunch. Are we comfortable with approving all of them at once? Okay. All right. Okay. May I have a motion to approve the proposed new courses for Darien High School for the 2024-2025 school year as presented? That's Mr. Brown, seconded by Ms. Best. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, all of you, for your time, both at the curriculum committee meeting and tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks very much.
Discussion and possible action on the approval of a 0.4 FTE resource allocation for special education. Ms. Shirley Klein.
Thank you. As noted in the November 3rd memorandum sent to Dr. Adley regarding the new request for a 0.4 special education teacher. As we indicated in the memorandum, we have an additional 42 students on the elementary level. With 42 new students on the elementary level come 42 new PPTs, evaluations, as well as team meetings and other responsibilities for special education teachers, related service providers. So last year, as you know, we spoke that with those PPT attendance meetings and with those team meetings and evaluations, missed sessions occur. And in an extraordinary effort to make up missed sessions, teachers have volunteered to use their prep periods, they're reimbursed for it, as well as lunch periods, and that's no longer sustainable. And as I noted in the memorandum, one, it's not best practice. They need their prep periods to prepare for their instruction and also lunch for wellness. So the reason we'd like to share this point for across the schools is we want our teachers to conduct the evaluations. We want our teachers to attend their PPTs, and we want them to manage the team meetings. Teacher coming in with a 0.4 would cover their classes while they were able to attend the meetings and conduct evaluations. We're looking at need. It changes month to month because different triennials happen at different months, different evaluations occur. So the assistant principals in the respective schools would coordinate which day of the week or how many days of the week, for instance. If right now one of our schools has 3 evaluations pending, that teacher would be assigned to there for the next 3 days. If someone else has 2 coming up in December, we would coordinate efforts at that time. So the rotation would be based on need, and we would be able to utilize this 0.4 special education teacher to make sure that we're not experiencing those kind of missed sessions throughout the school year. Stay ahead of it.
Before I turn it over for board questions, Shirley, can you explain why you need a special ed teacher as a substitute versus just the traditional substitute pool?
For compliance and also for best practice. We want to make sure there's a lesson plan left for that teacher to conduct and who is certified in the state of Connecticut. In the past, we've used our own teachers or we've used substitutes who are not certified, and that's clearly not complying with our requirements, nor is it best practice for students and learning.
Okay, thank you. Dave.
Thank you. Sure, I see the 0.4, and I guess my only question is that enough? Because I just wonder, what is the backlog? What is the workload? Do we want to build in a little bit of extra capacity here to prevent bottlenecks if there are, delays? And so I do appreciate your thrift that you always approach this with. Would 0.6 give you a little more wiggle room and help things out? Or, is this really, are you giving us the minimum or are you giving yourself a little extra capacity to keep up?
I'm looking for what our capacity looks like now. I will monitor it over the next 6 months, just looking at it, or hopefully prior to May, to see where we are. We're looking at what we have currently. That said, to your question, Mr. Brown, we have new initials coming in. So I'm looking at the current rate of initials, triennials, or any other updated evals. So I'll know more as the next several months happen. I'm hoping 0.4 will be adequate. If not, I certainly will come back to the board and say I wasn't able to meet our needs.
Can you explain how that works? Because you're talking about a person. How do you have capacity to just shift from one to another?
So the person that we have, who's a certified special education teacher, as you know, which is a very difficult opportunity to get right now, is available for 2 hours a day or possibly 3 hours a day. So I'm basing it on the availability of the staff member that we have who can meet our needs.
Thank you. Julie.
Thank you. Can we talk for a minute, Shirley, please, about 42 students with IEPs? That sounds like a very high number to me. Is that higher than we typically see in the first few months of the new year? And what's the thinking there?
I will speak to that when we do our presentation to the board of the increase over the last several years. I can give you an example though, especially that 1 year, if you recall, we had 65 students across the district. This year we have across the district K through 12, plus we have 87 students,
Okay.
of which 47 happen to be elementary.
Okay, and then
So
we'll talk
there
more
happens
about
to
that
be
at our next.
And we will speak about it because there is evidence that there is a COVID piece to this as well.
Mhm.
If you look at where the jumps were, they were actually first grade and fourth grade. So there's a trend that we see as a result of possibly one of the contributing factors was COVID. But at the same time, last year, we only had 8 students increase across the district. So I don't know that you'll see our percentage has gone up substantially, as has Connecticut. But from year to year, you don't know the trend. That 1 year we had 65 students. I think the majority of them were new entrants.
Okay.
So, but I will speak to that.
Okay. I think you kind of answered it, but my question was, does this person exist? But it sounds like you have someone identified.
Yes, we have someone who attended one of our meetings, actually, who's a parent, who attended our meetings and innocently introduced herself as a special education teacher at our meeting. And I said, that's really extraordinary. Can we talk? And so that's how it happened. Yes.
We've asked you to look more broad and finding people. That's a good one.
Greg, did you have a question?
Highly qualified teacher also.
I had someone similar to David, just in terms of, is this the Band-Aid solution or the comprehensive solution? But then my other question was just, and maybe not specific to this, but like, do we have a projection for what we think this is going to look like going forward? And I'm kind of tracking back to some of the conversation we had earlier in terms of projecting students out and the budget going forward. Like, how do we think about that in the context of special education and the expected requirements there?
And again, I will be addressing it when we meet on the 28th of November. Some of those projections, although they're hard to predict based on referral and based on new entrants, but we will show you a trend over the last several years.
Great.
Thank you.
Katie.
Thank you. Shirley, I just wanted to start by saying that I was really grateful that you brought this in the middle of the year and outside, and I appreciate just that you're demonstrating your responsive need to what is happening right now. So thank you for that. I have several pretty specific questions, and I'm wondering if it might make more sense for me to submit them to you ahead of the next meeting, perhaps through Jill, as it seems like that is the trend where some of these other ones. I did just want to now just clarify, I did not get from the memo that there was a person in mind, so I'm happy to hear that the issue of finding someone who's willing to work for Point Four seems to be already taken care of. I did want to ask if, just coming back to that same vein, was the Point Four partly determined because you knew of this person's availability? I'm just asking kind of which one came first.
I was looking at a 0.4. I would love her to be available even more if that's possible, but I'd be spreading it out. It'd still be a 0.4. So there may be one day that's 1 hour and one day it's 3 hours, depending on her availability.
So you're saying the 0.4 is what you think you need across the sort of
Elementary
like
schools now.
annual? Yes, but depending on the need, as you said, that would determine sort of like the weekly hours. Is that what I mean? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Anyone else?
Just, and there's no budgetary impact because
So typically we pay teachers if they're working through their lunch and prep in the account extended day in special ed. So what you'll see is a deficit in the special education teacher line item, but then a positive balance in the extended day. So that'll be in the finance report on Thursday. And then we'll do a superintendent's adjustment on the next because it's 2 salary accounts.
Thank you.
And just to add, Mr. Senior, to Rich's point, there, it is their per diem rate. So it's their hourly rate. So if it's a teacher who's highly seasoned teacher, it's a high rate hourly.
Thank you.
Julie.
Thank you. I was just going to add, again, as we look toward our next meeting, when we have our special education update, it does seem that we have had a lot of readjustments, reallocating, being responsive, certainly so far since the year has begun. And I'd love for there to be some discussion about how we're looking to next year. What are we learning from what's gone on? What seems to have changed? Anything that we can start to anticipate differently as we move forward, if that's possible at all. But I'd love for that to be a conversation at our next meeting.
We'll be sure to include that.
Thank you.
Questions? Okay. I also agree. Thank you for bringing this forward, Shirley. I appreciate you being responsive. Okay, with that, may I have a motion to approve a 0.4 FTE resource allocation for special education for the 2023-2024 school year? John seconded by Katie. All those in favor? That is unanimous.
Great, she can start tomorrow.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. Further discussion on participation fees for athletics, clubs, and councils. Alan and Rich.
Since the board had previously discussed this matter, given the financial conundrum that we have presented this evening to frame it, we thought we would continue the discussion, bring it back to the table because it certainly merits a discussion. If plausibly we can raise 0.5% in revenue, I think it merits the discussion about it because it's going to be a very challenging budget year. So it's with that we have before you a consideration of continuing the discussion with a model of kind of what might it look like should the board decide or otherwise to move forward with it. If the decision is don't include any of this as part of the budget, then that's the decision. If it's bring it back to the table and the budget will consider it, that's okay too. But we just have before you a model of literally 0.5% of what it might look like and how we might get there with it. And we're happy to walk through that scenario if you want to do that.
So similar to the previous discussion about the new courses, if we were to decide to move forward with it tonight, the authorization would be to have the superintendent model it in his budget. And, then it still does have to go through the budget process for any final approval. So this is just a model you mocked up. Rich, do you want to walk through it?
Sure. So we started the conversation back in June about participation fees and what they would potentially look like. For athletic participation fees, we looked at some of the neighboring districts in the DIRG, and this is modeled after Ridgefield, which is $200 a sport. New Canaan, for example, they don't fund any non-CIC, FCIC sports. And so the example here would be to have a higher fee for those sports. Obviously, for any fee that students pay who are free and reduced, if they're free, the fee would be waived. If they're reduced, they would only pay 30%. And then obviously, we would also look at if anybody had an economic hardship, didn't yet qualify for free and reduced. So based on a $200 fee and previous enrollment in sports, that fee would anticipate collecting about $326,000. We also talked about clubs and council fees. A flat fee of $100 at the high school, $100 at the middle school, and $50 at the elementary school. Again, free and reduced would apply there as well. This would collect approximately $176,000. The types of things that are currently shown in the line, clubs and councils, that these fees would not apply to are things like class advisors, musical concerts, drama, and webmaster stipends. So looking at theater participation fees, we looked at Trumbull as an example. And so Trumbull has a participation fee for theater, similar to the athletics. So the same type of flat fee structure of $200 per student, that would increase revenue by about $18,000. Intramurals, we looked at a $100 participation fee, again, with free and reduced applications considered. Intramurals do run at the middle school primarily, and then Holmes is currently the only elementary school that runs intramurals. And based on previous enrollment, that would be about 29,000. Again, the enrollment can fluctuate, so these would be dependent on what's actually enrolled. And then finally, we looked at parking fees. Currently, our parking fee is $110. We did include the DIRG comparison. So Ridgefield is at 200, Westport, Weston and Wilton are at 150, then New Canaan is at 40. If we went to 150, which is about where the majority of districts are, that would raise another $11,000.
Okay. Questions, comments? Julie?
Just a quick confirmation, Rich, these are just straight lifts of current rostered
So it is-
participants, there's no attrition built in.
No, so
assuming
it's
that
whatever the enrollment was last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. John?
I mean, the reason I'm glad we looked at this is, to your point, Jill, we're looking at some serious budget challenges. And I still don't have a decision made on this item, but I think it should be robustly discussed as part of a budget option for the board. And I'd like to see, if the superintendent's willing to be put in the budget, and then we can talk about it within the whole budget context, because there's still missing pieces, which we haven't seen through the superintendent's proposed budget.
Robin?
I have some clarifying questions, but I mean, I appreciate all the modeling that went into this, but it would be helpful to know, for one, what the rationale would be of charging $400 for non-FCIAC and $200 for sports that are offered. I mean, are the costs that much more for those sports? Because my understanding is that does not include, that the rental fees that they pay are on top of that.
Correct.
Is
So
that correct?
the only reason we looked at that difference model was really looking at what New Canaan does. So for example, New Canaan has those non-FCIC, CIAC sports, but they have parent fundraising or booster fundraising to cover the cost entirely. And so this would just be a step in that direction.
So would this replace the need for the parents to fundraise to cover costs? Or would this be
No,
additive to
this
that?
would be additive to that.
Okay, that's one question. And then the club participation fees, one concern I have is whether that would significantly decrease the participation rate in many of the student-run clubs, many of which are relatively small and based on special interests. So that's just one question. I also noted on your list that you sent out today that Mu Alpha Theta is on that, but that's actually a math honor society. And I wonder if that should be excluded, similar to National Honor Society and the Science Honor Society, et cetera, because I don't think it's fair to charge Honor Society students $100, even though they do have meetings. And then Theater 308 was not included in the club and council list either.
It was broken out separately as the theater.
Oh, okay, okay. Those are the main questions I had. Thank you.
Julie?
Thank you. Kind of at a high level, I guess what I struggle with here is this really in the spirit of what extracurriculars and athletics are intended to be in the public school system, the pay to participate. And also, as you just mentioned, the amount of fundraising and parent support that already goes into running most, I'm not sure what the right word, of these programs. It feels a little like double dipping. To be perfectly honest, I would love to get an understanding of how we consider the cost of running these individual activities versus what we're talking about collecting as a participation fee. I thought we started the conversation looking at this as a way to offset expenses related to the programs. But what I'm looking at now, to my knowledge, is not connected to that. So I'm unclear. And again, it brings me back to this question that I think I've raised and a few others have raised, is kind of philosophically, what are we looking at when we talk about participation fees or revenue streams? What are we comfortable with or open to? So I'm having a hard time reacting to this particular very detailed document, although I appreciate having something to react to. Just to share a few thoughts I have at this stage.
Dave?
So similar sentiment. I do appreciate this, Rich, given the big budgetary challenges we have going forward, and I think we do need to discuss it. My concern is at this stage, we still have some of the policy and programmatic and thematic issues we haven't addressed as a board. So I'm not sure how we can jump into the budget conference or the budget season without addressing those. And I would hate to open up budget season to those kinds of questions if we haven't covered this first. So I don't know how to proceed exactly, but I just think we're kind of crossing things a little bit here to move this forward. So I don't know if we have time to address this further, but I think we really have to hit those issues first before we can know how to proceed in the budget process.
Katie?
Thank you. I share the concerns just made by my fellow board members. I would also say that I appreciate the additional document that Robin referenced that we were sent earlier. When I looked at that, I cannot imagine charging an elementary kid $50 to participate in safety patrol. They literally put on a little vest and they stand outside and they model good citizenship. And you have fifth graders that are helping kindergartners and first graders make sure that they can follow school rules and walk the line and stay safe and kind. And I can't imagine charging them $50 for that. Additionally, I appreciate what Dave just said about our process. And I would say that moving forward and putting this model into the superintendent's budget to see what it looks like seems problematic to me. I think that that's putting things way ahead. Like, why would we build something into a complicated and detailed budget before we had decided that that's what we want to do?
Sarah?
Yeah, I'll echo that. I think I think we're a little cart before the horse here. I understand the rationale of wanting to find these revenue streams, and I think, you know, there could be something down the road, but I think it's a larger conversation that we have not yet had. That's all. I will just echo what people say.
I just have one more question. And again, this is clarifying that maybe for future discussion, the intramurals expense at Middlesex, it was like $44,000. Is that stipends that are being paid that the BOE budget covers? Or
And a small amount of materials, but yeah.
so potentially a participation fee on intramurals would help to offset advisor stipend.
Correct,
costs.
similar to clubs and councils.
Similar, well, are the advisors for the clubs and councils paid stipends is what they are?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And coaches for
Right, and
athletics.
coaches.
I mean, it's a budgetary offset.
Right.
Sarah?
I remembered the second thing I was gonna say. I am also not sure that I'm comfortable putting this into the budget without having more detailed conversations with students and with parents and getting a sense of what that, I forget which one of you said, who would this take? Maybe do this, anyways, would this take participation down by a chunk? I think we need to get a better sense of what the appetite is for our community to do this. And understanding it's our decision, but I still think we have to take into consideration that.
Okay, Robin?
Yeah, and I have 3 high school students and I'm thinking, okay, for anyone who has children at the high school, if they're a 3 season athlete and are in a few clubs, that can easily get to $1,000 per student or $3,000 per family. And I think obviously parents in this community spend lots on different things outside of school, but that does end up building pretty quickly. And I think we need to be careful, especially about the participation in clubs, because we try to promote extracurricular participation, and many of these clubs, I'm concerned that would really diminish how many students would want to be involved.
Okay.
Thank you. Also had a second thought. I remember discussing this a little bit previously, and I remember it coming back up again as school was starting. One thing that I think is important to note in part of this conversation, we'd asked Chris Manfredonio when he was here if we talked about whether or not this would replace the fees that parents and families are voluntarily contributing for things like, you know, just team kind of community building, whether it's, you know, the dinners, all those things.
Nice to have.
Yes, thank you. So I would also want us to see that side by side. I think it's important to understand that we're not just, that this proposal of asking, say, $200 for a sport is not the totality of what the ask is on the parents. I think that's important to see in the aggregate, what would really be there. And that varies quite a bit by sport too, that we were just noticing and, you know, in discussing fall sports. So that might be a little harder to track down, but I think it's important.
So Rich, what's the scope of our understanding of nice to haves?
So we did provide back in June and the summer retreat, like what the voluntary fees or the student contribution fees and the banquet fees, things like that. So between student activity fees, voluntary fees, you know, that's $450,000 would have been what was collected in the previous year.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry, can I just confirm, that's the total of what went through student activity accounts for the
For just
athletics
athletics,
teams?
yes.
Okay,
just-
thank you.
Okay, so our options are, we can push it forward at this time the way it is, send it into the budget, or we can pull it to another meeting and try and talk about it, or we can table this, or we can reject it altogether.
Jill?
Yes.
Just one, we didn't talk about the parking fee proposal, which I actually think makes sense compared to the DIRG comparison. So I wouldn't want to completely throw out everything at this time.
Okay.
I'll agree with that. I think the parking fees make sense to me. The rest of it, I think I'm not ready to go forward with.
Okay. All right. Can we take a sense of the meeting? Okay. Dave? Okay. Julie?
I'm good with parking fees moving forward too.
Okay. Greg?
Yeah, parking fees only.
Okay. John? Sounds
We
like
have a
we have a sense of the
sensor.
meeting. All right. Okay, so please put the parking fees in the budget. And are we formally tabling the athletic participation fees?
What does table mean?
I guess we would move it to the spring to knock through any sort of modeling of attrition rates to look at further information on the program. Or are we rejecting it altogether? Dave?
We have time to get it in what's between now and budget. It's not possible, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And I think maybe not to do it the way we'd want to do it.
Point of order, is this an action item on the agenda tonight?
It's not, I'm just taking a
the
sense of the
discussion?
meeting. We just have left this one kind of drifting, and I'd prefer that we not drift, even though it isn't a formal action.
The implication is that it's not going to come forward in my budget as a proposal. I
Right.
think that's what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah, and just to remind everybody, that means we're looking at baked in costs of 6.13 to 8.02 increase in the budget. So
Unless we find
One
another revenue
question.
stream.
I
During-
didn't put the parking in there, so you take that down.
During, this is more of a process, during the budget
Yes.
discussion, if a need becomes, necessary to make some additional
Right.
room in the budget, would this be something that could be proposed at that time that we might do something? I don't know if that's problematic to do it that way, but,
Well, I think if the issue is that we don't feel the work is complete at this stage, then it's a challenge probably to insert it at that time.
But that said, there's nothing stopping a board member from putting something on an ad cut night. So whether or not it has the work behind it, process wise, it could be done. Would it be the smartest thing? Maybe not,
No.
but it could be done.
We tried to stray away from adding new initiatives during
Correct.
budget discussions. So
Yes, we have.
that's why we're doing this at this point. So.
Okay. Okay. So just one more time, are we, well, not formally, are we tabling this for the spring for a future discussion, or is it off the table for people?
In its current iteration, I'm not open to discussing it this way
Right.
further. So that's just for one person to speak up.
Okay, so do you want more information? We want to see what potential attrition rates might look like. We want to see so we'd have to actually discuss what the board wants to see, or people would need to define that better. But we are talking about then putting it off until a future discussion.
I think, yeah, first principles, what are the goals we're looking to achieve?
Yeah.
Well, the goal, again, we reiterated the goal. It's to offset the costs of extra.
No, I meant more in Julie's sense of what are the. what are
Oh,
the
sorry,
purposes?
my bad.
Yes, so that, and then to add to that, a next level would be to understand what the expenses are of these activities, because I still don't have a clear picture on that. I've seen student activity accounts reports, but that's not money that came out of the Board of Ed budget. That's money that came in from parents and fundraising and was spent on events and activities and swag and so on, but it's not stuff from our budget. So
No,
I
I
want to
was-
understand expenses related to our budget.
Yeah, they were $1,000 per player, give or take.
Okay,
But outside of athletics.
so it sounds like, Alan, do you have your understanding of, for the moment, what you need to do?
I know I'm not including it in the budget other than the
Okay.
parking. I mean, that's.
All right,
we've been talking
so it's
about it.
it's in the parking lot for next spring.
I think the soft costs are important as well. Just like, I think a bunch of people mentioned that, but it's not just like, what are the current expenses, but like there's soft costs of lower participation rate and impact on
Yes.
like the student body, which I think are like equally as important as everything else we talked about.
Agreed, Greg. Thank you. Yes, Dave.
Just to follow up to that, I mean, the clubs and councils, one question for me has always been, what's the attrition rate throughout the year? So I actually see a positive if we have a fee there. It might be act as a gate for some people who sign up and never show up over to the year goes. So I'd love to see some of that data when the further discussion comes up.
Okay. Rich, thank you for the work. We appreciate it. Okay. Item H, further discussion and possible action on proposed revisions to board policies 4125, evaluation, termination, and non-renewal of athletic coaches, 4150, administrative regulations regarding bloodborne pathogens, 4175, prohibition on recommendations for psychotropic drugs, 4300, employee use of the district's computer systems and electronic communications, 4325, hiring of certified staff, 4350, hiring of non-certified staff, That's it. Dave and March.
So we have this on. I have not heard anything of you.
Nope.
It's the second read, right?
It's a second reading, yeah. Okay, any further questions or discussion? Okay. I have these motion as a group. I'm assuming it's okay to take them as a group. Okay. May I have a motion to approve the proposed revised Board of Education policies, 4125 evaluation, termination, and non-renewal of athletic coaches, 4150 administrative regulations regarding bloodborne pathogens, 4175 prohibition on recommendations for psychotropic drugs, 4300 employee use of district's computer systems and electronic communications, 4325 hiring of certified staff, 4350 hiring of non-certified staff. Sarah, seconded by Julie. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Further review and possible action on proposed 24-25 budget calendar. That is you, Alan. You have a chance to talk to other folks.
Not in person, but I haven't heard back that there's any changes. We have certainly one of our representatives here this evening. If there's any contributions to that discussion, we can certainly add them. But otherwise, it's other than we changed January 23 to 2024 because that's what it would be. I don't know how we didn't spot that, but anyway.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's as it has been for a while.
We talked a little bit about this last time, but maybe we want to remove the March 19, 2024 special Board of Education meeting. I think that I'm on March 19th, the special
Yes,
meeting,
uh-huh.
special Board of Ed, the joint BOE, RTMF and BNRTM Ed. It's in the middle of the Board of Finance cycle. And I think we can figure out how to work with the committees. I think we tried it last year, but I'm not sure we wanted to move forward with that model.
No, the point was that you'd meet with the Board of Finance at the, if they called you into a meeting, and then the RTMs you'd meet when they would call you in to a meeting for clarification.
Is everybody comfortable with that? We don't really need to necessarily have people here for other folks' budget cycle. Okay. Any other questions?
So what happens instead? If we're taking that off?
Well, we would be subject to their budget
As
cycle.
needed or as requested?
Yes.
Yes,
exactly.
versus us calling. I mean, we can vote on this and then I don't even,
Understood.
they may or may not want to.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion to
Sorry,
approve.
Jill, we're just
Yes,
eliminating that. Otherwise it stands. We're taking that off, right? It's
Correct.
just striking. Thank you.
Yes. May I have a motion to approve the proposed 2024-2025 budget calendar as amended? That's Dave, seconded by Julie. All those in favor? That's unanimous. And then we want to do the regular Board of Education meetings. That is Alan.
It's pretty straightforward. That's as we have seen it before.
What did you do with November? Did you leave it on that? Is that the following Wednesday again, or is it a Tuesday?
I think whether it's Tuesday or Wednesday. I
Yeah,
think it's Tuesday.
so you left it on the Tuesday following election day. Okay, the only thing that does is that if we have subcommittees, which we often do that third, or, like on the 14th, 15th of November, then we had to cancel them this year because we had a gap. So just note to the board that if we run our subcommittee schedules on the regular, and we have a gap in between election day and the actual next board meeting,
The organizational meeting.
in the organizational meeting, then we can't run committees. So we have in some years past met, that would be November, 6th. So just something to look at.
I mean, does it make sense to just do an organizational meeting?
On the night of the 6th.
Yeah.
Maybe.
You could do that. Just add in an organizational meeting. You want a third meeting in November?
It would be a quick organizational meeting. I mean,
Are we worried about committee assignments? Because we haven't done that yet. And-
Correct. So, and I got a committee meeting on Thursday.
Right.
So now like,
So,
yeah,
and we had two committee meetings scheduled for
Canceled,
last
yeah.
Thursday
Right, that
and
we had to
Friday.
I'm just saying that
Yes.
now here we are a week later and we don't have committee assignments.
Right.
So
Right.
Right, because we can't do it until tomorrow. We can't do it till the board's constituted.
thank
So,
you. That's the piece I was.
yeah.
yes.
So if we
yes.
move the organizational meeting ahead, it's just a quickie. We wouldn't have to drag the cabinet out or anything. It'd just be a board meeting.
Yeah.
It would be what did it take tonight? 4 minutes?
Yep.
And then you could commence with the constitution of the committees immediately after the election day, and then we'd be rolling for the next board meeting.
Understood.
So you would do that Wednesday, the 6th?
Yeah.
Wait,
Yes,
and
Robin.
are you saying the organizational meeting happens before election day?
No, right
It's
after.
a Wednesday.
The day after, Wednesday after,
So election day is on the
Tuesday.
5th,
Mhm.
yeah.
November 5th. No, I'm
Mhm.
sorry.
Would we like to do that?
That makes
It
sense.
can be a special meeting, honestly. It doesn't have to be
Mhm.
um, part of the regular meeting schedule, but we can go ahead
Let's
and
do it
add
so we
it. We just
remind-
add it.
remember
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Okay.
On the
We won't
6th?
remember
On the
it.
6th.
Wednesday, the 6th.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's make a note that it's an organizational, please. Okay, so again, I'll ask for approval as amended. Everybody clear on the change? Okay. May I have a motion to approve the schedule of regular Board of Ed meetings for the 2024 calendar year as amended? Sarah, seconded by Julie. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Okay. Personnel report, March.
So the two resignations on the personnel report, one you filled tonight, so thank you. And the bus driver, Rich has an offer out to someone. As Dr. Adley said, we did manage today to figure out a plan for the two Spanish teachers. I mean, the issue with those is that the people resigned after the start of the school year, and it's just impossible to fill those positions. But we have Christina Mauricio, our department chair, and a retired teacher who has worked for us before, who's popped up and he's willing to fill in until January. So we do have a couple of openings still. Again, these are teachers who left after the beginning of the school year. Most of them are being covered by certified staff, our own certified staff.
Where are the openings?
So we have special education at the high school, but our teachers are covering. We have a long-term sub who's retired, who's covering. We do have the psychologist at Tokenique, which we're working our best to try to fill and cover sessions the best way we can.
Sarah.
Going back to the Spanish teacher, can you remind me what's happening in January? Like, do we have somebody in line for January?
Yes, we have
Okay.
someone that we've hired for Oxbridge and somebody that we're about to hire for Tokenique.
Okay, thank you.
Both will start in January.
They need to give 30 days. Yeah.
Okay, Julie.
And just to the psychologist position that's open at Tokenique, just to make sure that we're communicating with parents what resources are available to kids if they need anything. I feel like that came up in our town hall last week. I hope that the Tokenique community is getting the same kind of support and listing of resources for, ways that they can get supports for their kids when they need to, until this can be filled.
I've been in touch with Ryan, but I'll follow up with them tomorrow just to make sure that the notification. Right now, Morgan, the psychologist who's there full-time, is making sure that she's seeing all the students, which means other evaluations are being done by other district personnel or outside personnel. We have Katie Guy from Middlesex doing some evals. We have Taylor Kurtz from Fitchburg and Val. So we're just working so her time can be spent seeing students and using our other resources to do evaluations and some outside sources also. But I will confirm
Okay,
to
and
make sure.
things like lunch bunch, things like someone whose door is always open, any of those kinds of additional supports, if helpful, might be great for parents to know about.
Well, definitely.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Katie?
I would just say that I hope that we can also communicate about the Spanish teachers as well, that I think we also learned that from Oxbridge, that, and the board has received some feedback that that having that disparity amongst the elementary schools is unsettling as well. So I appreciate the internal staff stepping up for that, and we just hope that we can communicate where we're at along the way as we finalize.
Okay. All right, any other questions on the PAR? Okay, and just to confirm, so our kids are getting Spanish instruction.
The Spanish instruction that they're getting now is not ideal. I would completely agree with that. And I wouldn't validate it actually at the status as it is at the moment. But starting on Monday, they will have certified Spanish teachers in the classes that will continue through the new year. And at the new year, we have 2 Spanish teachers already lined up.
Thank you. Okay. May I have a motion? Oh, excuse me, public comment.
Good evening. Anyone in person would like to participate? If anyone online would like to participate, please use the raised hand icon. There are no raised hands at this time.
Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn, please? That's Julie, seconded by John.